is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Travelers, Season 1, Episode 4, Hall. In this episode, I hate this guy so much. I hate him. With every bit of my parts. And I'm so glad things go the way they go, but I'm also extremely worried that this dude is going to come back around and be a problem later. This is a good episode. I like this one. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Michael for commissioning this episode. I actually, over the past couple of days, rewatched episodes 1 through 3 with Owen because we were talking about time travel stories and things like that. And I was like, you know what? You should really check this out. I think that you would like it. And it was really funny because going back, I had forgotten just how fucking brutal this first scene is, where the woman from the library, who I guess is an actual librarian, gets beat up, and then Marcy gets almost beat up. And I actually got up and left the room and went into the kitchen to get a drink or something because I was just like, oh, I don't want to sit through this again. But there are so many moments that I feel I kind of appreciated more going back and watching it now that I know a little bit more about what's coming. And I also really was surprised at how carefully they dole out information. I forgot just how long it takes before you understand how a messenger works, for example. The fact that those are prepubescent kids and why they are and all of that. So I find that to be the kind of thing that is, how to say this, a lot of times when you are watching a show, and shows especially, or books, it doesn't really happen in movies because you have such a much more limited amount of time. But a lot of times they will try and rush info dumping you with everything, right out of the gate. They will try and work it into conversation in weird, unnatural ways. They will try and have somebody on the news telling you about a thing. And they don't trust that you are going to stay interested if you don't have all of the information right away. And I am somebody who has a lot of patience regarding logistics and backstory or, world building or whatever. I definitely want to know some things right up front. And I will get frustrated if too much is dumped in my lap that I don't understand. And they just are very, very slow at doling out when they've already had me coping with a bunch of plot stuff. But the way that this show has done it so far, I really like. And I also very, very much enjoy the slow build of what's going on with other travelers and finding out just how many there are. And I find that in particular to be really fascinating. There's something about how many more there are than I really thought. When I'm watching this the first time, the very first episode, I think it's Marcy that says there are thousands of travelers here already. And I forgot that that's the number that she says, thousands. I kind of keep picturing it as being something that's really infrequent. There's a couple hundred. But thousands, sure, spread out across the world, that may not be particularly high impact, but they're probably going to be a lot of them concentrated in the same areas of the world, right? So that's the part that I find the most interesting, is that there is a lot of there are a lot of directions that this show can go in because they've given themselves that kind of room. And let's see, Hugabug. Oh, Agnes and Hugabug are in the chat. Hello to both of you. And Hugabug says, kind of like Jim Butcher with the slow release of the world and how magic works. Exactly. And that's the sort of thing that if it was all just dumped on you, you wouldn't, first of all, you wouldn't remember it. It would feel much more like the author just sharing their notes with you about what they want their world to be, and much less about like you were experiencing it with a character and finding things out for yourself. And it would also just kind of be like somebody reading you the rules to like a board game or something. It's the kind of thing that if you just read the rules and try and remember them to play, that's not how that works. You need to have the rules out and start a game. And by playing, you remember stuff and you start to understand things. And it's just a lot. It does take patience, though. It does take an audience that is willing to like stick with you and trust that you will tell them stuff. So, and it also takes you making a plot that can function without the information that they get later and still make sense. And that's the other key thing is, and I ran into this a little bit with like the Witcher series, and I'm getting better at understanding how to read that series because there is so much that gets dropped in my lap info wise that it turns out I don't really need to know like at all. And I focused so much on trying to remember that stuff that it sort of overwhelmed the actual story. And now I'm realizing like, oh, I can just kind of chill. I don't have to pay attention to all of these little details. But the reverse can also be true, that like somebody can drop a bunch of stuff and not give you enough information, and you're left reading it going, I can't tell if I'm supposed to know what this means or not. And I think I am, and I don't. I'm going to be recording an episode of Red Sister right after this one, and I had that happen a little bit this time. So anyway, parceling out info and world building is really fucking tricky, is what it comes down to. And I am not averse to doing it in a totally different way than this, of course. But when it's something that's set in the present, and so much of the rest of the way the world works is very familiar and you know where they are and the way that people are, it's a lot easier to do it slowly and parcel things out really carefully. And it also gets me, like when I was rewatching it, I was just really surprised at how much I wanted Owen to watch all 3 episodes and really like get it, because there were so many little pieces of information that he wouldn't get until we got to the 3rd episode. And I wanted him to know about that because I wanted to talk with him about it, you know? So anyway, all right, back to this episode. This one is really interesting because of the involvement with other travelers, as well as the twist at the end in which you kind of wonder if maybe we're going to be killing an innocent person today. Now, I would like to say that I really did not think that was going to happen. I didn't think that that's who we were going to be, you know, that we were going to kill. But I also was like, I don't know how much I don't know Grant McLaren, who is some other dude in his body, but that's what we call him. I don't know him. I only have watched 3 episodes. He is for the entire first episode, he is a different person. And every time that I have seen him, episodes 2 and 3, he has been on a mission, which changes a little bit of the context in which I know him. And so I'm aware of what he's like when he has very specific orders to fill and is supposed to be doing a certain thing. But when it comes down to his own judgment and making a call that nobody has told him the rules for, that is not something that I felt like I could make a call on. And if I had been asked, I probably would have said something pretty similar to Hall, which is that he's somebody who falls in line with the rules. But the thing is that Hall took it in a different direction than I would have. Hall is like, oh, he's the kind of guy who falls in line and follows the rules. And when he says that, my instinct was to just be like, well, why do you think letting you lead the team is following the rules? Like, you're asking him to murder his partner, and you don't seem to see that to him that's the opposite of following the rules. That's going against protocols that he has been trained in. And that, I think, is what Hall really doesn't understand. He is a person who puts the mission and the accomplishment of the mission at the expense of any protocols as top priority. And this team, their priority is to not get found out. And by not get found out, I mean they are trying to live their ordinary lives the way they are supposed to. Hall, I would love to know what life he had that this dude stepped into, because I have a really hard time believing that he is just living Hall's life the way that he is supposed to, according to the protocols. Now, I would love, if any of you know that this is something I can find somewhere that isn't spoilery, if you could share with me the list of protocols. However, I bet it is spoilery. If you want to share just like the first 6, which I feel like we've encountered, that's fine. But I know that like continuing to live the life of the host is one of them. And this dude just really seems to be like the protocols are guidelines for those who don't know what they're doing. And if you do know what you're doing, you can just kind of do whatever you want. And I love the character of Hall, to be honest, because Hall is a very real seeming person. It's getting a sudden villain into a show that has an established sort of ensemble cast is a really tricky proposition, because sometimes it can be done in a way that sort of feels very, very shoehorned in, or the person can be such an over-the-top villain that you're just like, come on, somebody would have killed this guy by now. I feel like Hall is excellent because he has got the loyalty of his men, clearly, right? And it does seem like he really cares about his men, is the other thing. Like, when Marcy is taking care of him, there's a lot of the, what are you doing? Make sure you save him. I have to take a moment and decide between these two guys. We shouldn't be moving him right now. And I really do believe that all of that stems from him actually caring. So it's nice that they don't make it that this guy is just a total hard ass who doesn't give a fuck about anybody. It's simply that the people that he cares about are the ones that have proven themselves to be on his side this whole time. And there are people like that, right? But personal loyalty, it's clear later on in the episode, he specifically says this to one of the guys. That's top priority for him. So I feel like that gives him a little bit of extra dimension that I really like. And also the fact that he has the vibe of somebody who has really seen some shit. And while I do think McLaren did the right thing in the end, I also feel like I could see turning into somebody like Hall eventually. Like, there is just something about being in the shit over and over again that can harden people. It can do a number of different things. It doesn't necessarily end up that way. Of course, there's so many people who have been through a lot of shit and they don't turn out like this dude. But I feel like it's a definite possibility, especially with somebody who tends to like be a bit of a control freak already. And especially when you start to see that maybe things from like the way that the director tells them what is expected of them, that's not always consistent or clear, or even necessarily like it maybe sometimes comes through and it's like impossible, that he is sort of shelving the director, which this group of 5 is so reliant on still because they're brand new to this world. I could understand starting to be like, whatever, you want me to get this done, right? So let me get it done and shut the fuck up. You don't even know. And this is sort of a thing that happens with cops. And this is part of why the a few bad apples theory gets fucked. because there are a lot of cops out there who just feel like I have a job to do and I'm going to get it done. And I don't really give a shit about your weird little rules about what I'm allowed to do here. I know that this person did this. I'm going to get him arrested for this. Or I know that you need this number of people arrested and I will figure out a way to do it. And I'm sure that they did something, whatever. And that like his willingness to sacrifice people on the outside for whatever. And it is like the kind of thing that if you don't fall in line with somebody who is in charge, who has this attitude, you got in some way, whether that be, regardless, I'm getting off topic here, but that is like the few bad apples thing is probably more accurate to travelers because they are encouraged to stay away from one another in general. But I could see if they were a more tight-knit group that this could have corrupted everybody really, really easily. And the fact that it has happened with him indicates that this is something that happens, period. So there are going to be more groups of travelers that they run into that are doing things like this. And I would love to know just how far that can go, because it's really borderline at this point where he's doing deals and making choices and creating plans that, like, as we see from the start, don't really work out super well. He says something about how, like, well, this plan would have worked. And McLaren's like, yeah, we're the FBI and we were like literally on your shit this whole time. So that wasn't a great plan. And how many travelers out there manage to get away with this kind of thing? The start of the episode, when we see these three guys being photographed, and we have Hall and we have the other guy, oh man, I forgot the other two characters' names. Let's see if I've got, is it Kyle and Carter, right? Is that right? And they are all hanging around at this like wharf talking. They seem to be like on the water somewhere. And we have McLaren and Forbes hanging out in a boat watching all of this through binoculars. And they're talking. There's a moment when McLaren says to just be patient. And Forbes says, that was what you said about the Jonas Walker case, and he fell off the face of the earth. Guys, remind me, Jonas Walker is what happened there? Was Jonas? I thought that was the guy that was going to shoot up a bunch of people that they like stopped in the very first episode. Is that not right? But then if they stopped him, his body was there, so it wouldn't be he fell off the face of Earth, is it? Like, I might be misremembering exactly who it is they're talking about here. But regardless, McLaren is like, you need to let that go, partner. And Forbes says, yeah, I know. I'm like a dog with a bone, I guess. I really love their relationship. And the fact that McLaren does seem to take to this very naturally. Because I was sort of waiting for there to be a lot of really awkward moments of McLaren, like really, really making weird choices that alarm him or that alarm people around him. And instead, it's just been a lot of very small things that are super, super easy to explain. And his relationship with his partner seems to be almost identical to what it was before. His personality is so close to the original McLaren's personality that, like, his own girlfriend, wife, whatever she is, Carly, actually says when she met the original McLaren that she wasn't sure if it was him or not. She kind of thought maybe he was already in there. So that's kind of a fun thing. So we see this group, and it turns out that they are Russians, and they are selling some part to them. And it is, to me, it looks like some tech that is a little bit, like, I honestly wondered if this was going to be another, like, dark matter thing, like they were dealing with in episode 3, or no, episode 2, I guess it was. But yeah, they are handing off a ton of money for one of these parts. It all looks like it's going pretty according to plan. And then all of a sudden, one of the Russians runs over Hall after they've like handed the money off and everything. I don't know exactly what went wrong here, and it's not like it necessarily matters in the end. But there's a lot of exchanges of fire. The black dude gets like hit by a car, and we wind up finding out later that he's got like a ton of internal bleeding and winds up dying. And I have to be honest, this scene is really high impact to me. I don't know if it's because it's so much of the action you see from like above, but there's a sort of a distance to it, and there is a sort of understated action to it. It's not an over dramatic people like, doing body rolls before they like spring up to their feet and shoot. And there's no like, MMA style fighting or anything like that. It's just a kind of a mad scramble and a bunch of people just randomly shooting, and cars that are very ordinary looking cars, not even going that fast. And because of all of that and how realistic it seems because of it, it felt really upsetting to watch. I was genuinely like, oh my God, as all of this was happening, even though it's kind of low key in comparison to how scenes like this play out on other TV shows. And McLaren goes up to the guy on the ground with the backpack full of money, and he's dying. And the guy says, Traveler 3468, support required. Coordinates 47 degrees, 14 minutes, 35.045 seconds. Make and model confirmed, units are en route. And then you go back to him continuing, end of message. So McLaren has to find a way to separate himself, and he tells his partner to wait for backup, and he's going to go after them. And when he finds them, when he says support required, I don't know how many of you got right away that support required meant that he was supposed to be helping these guys out. I didn't get that. So he just goes to like what I think is a warehouse or something somewhere. And I really wasn't sure what he was walking into. I thought that like he was being told to jump on a separate, maybe slightly like related mission or a whole other thing. And he walks in there, and it turns out that they are trying to help the dude with the gunshot wounds. And they are holed up here, and somehow the director knew, or whomever knew exactly where these guys were going to be and where to send McLaren to help them. And McLaren calls into Philip and makes sure that Carly is going to she's going to come armed, that she's going to bring all of her medical equipment and everything. And she walks in, and this is where Hall is. And Hall at first does not believe that McLaren got the information from an adult messenger, because that would have killed him. To which McLaren is like, apparently they thought he was dying anyway, so it did kill him. So this poor dude is laid up on the table, and he is in really bad shape, but he nor Hall realizes that the black dude who got hit by a car is like in worse shape than either one of them. And it is heartbreaking to me that he keeps it to himself this long. Like it's not until like later that anybody even finds out how badly he's injured. And I love the fact that like we have this happen, that somebody could get hit and have internal injuries and winds up dying, unlike the guy who got shot. Because that's something that television really glosses over, is the effects of invisible injuries, Anya says, I don't think he knew either. Hugabug says, no idea. I thought it was going to be a complete different group. Yeah, exactly. So this was a fun little twist. They tried to take our money and the component and probably sell it somewhere else and busted it in the process. They had gone rogue. They're talking about another group of travelers. You saw the rest. Now where's the medic? So the Russians were another, hold on. Let's see. What is this? What happened? Our mission was to acquire a component from Russian travelers. Yeah, that's what I thought. And to deliver it to another team for testing. The Russians' historian was dead, so they were out of cash. We were then instructed to finance them in exchange for the handoff. That's a really, really alarming development, guys. The historian was dead, so they were out of cash. Truly, what do you do when Philip dies? That's fucked up. Like, you're screwed. You're screwed. I have no idea how this show goes. I don't have a good handle on exactly, like, what kind of show this is. Is this a show that would kill Philip off? Or is he going to be, like, is the whole team going to survive? I don't know. But just the thought of how, like, up the creek they'd be without him, I guess they could get assigned a new historian, but I don't know how that works. But yeah, he says they got greedy. A traveler team turned on you, he says. And I'm trying to find what Carter, he winds up, he like scoffs and says they must be new. And Hall smirks a little and is like, yeah, they went rogue, tried to take our money and the component and sell it somewhere else. So apparently this is some shit that goes down fairly frequently. And I find it really, like, irresponsible that apparently whatever training the group is that McLaren has, they do not get the kind of training that would prepare them for running into other travelers who do not have their best interests at heart. This is something that, like, it's one of those things like fucking sex ed, where we're going to pretend that this doesn't happen to sort of make it like we didn't put the idea in your head, so we can't be blamed if you go and do this thing. But prepare them, guys. You have to acknowledge that this shit goes badly, that people are people. And if they wind up in a bad spot where they have the opportunity to take advantage of somebody, that can go down. And just pretending that that's not a thing that happens is just so, like, it's not just a stupid stance to take, but it's counterproductive and bad for your teams, you know? But that's how I feel about a lot of the world in general, is that we just choose to believe shit or say that we believe shit because it's, like, unsavory to look at the reality of what world we actually live in, and I cannot respect that at all. So yeah, he's asking where the medic is, and it's really clear from the moment that he meets Hall, but right here in particular, you get a clear look at the fact that Hall is super aggressive, feels that he should be in charge of everything, is sort of like, just does not respect any of these folks' abilities. And what kills me is that he's making a lot of judgments about, like, ancillary shit rather than looking at their actual abilities in the moment. And that, for me, I mean, it makes sense because he considers loyalty to himself as a person to be the primary objective rather than loyalty to the director, for example, or the mission. And I guess his assessment, because he doesn't worry about whether their abilities are up to snuff, because he knows that they wouldn't have gotten picked if it weren't for the fact that they can do whatever it is that they're assigned to do. He is looking at all of this, like, these little behavioral things instead to establish whether or not these people are any good at their job. But yeah, this is when he tries to say that, like, if it hadn't gone wrong, it was a good plan. And McLaren has to be like, yeah, the FBI was closing in on you. You definitely we're not going to get away with this. It was not a good plan, actually. So this basically wraps up with Marcy coming in and telling them that Carter is about to die from internal hemorrhaging. His blood can save Luca. Is that his name? And if he chooses to do this, and by him I mean Hall, he can save the gunshot victim, or he can let both of them die. But this is something that he has to make a decision on. And Marcy is trying to say, we need to bring them to a hospital because I do not have the resources to keep this guy alive. To which Hall says, well, the director obviously thinks that you do, or you wouldn't be here, would you? And Marcy just kind of looks at McLaren, who raises his eyebrows like, he kind of has a point, Marcy. And she sort of decides in that moment that she's going to do something that she obviously would not otherwise risk. Like, this is not something that she would be willing to do if she wasn't being given no other choice. But eventually they decide to use Carter's blood. And I feel real bad for Carter. Like, he's being a champ about the whole thing, to be honest. But because he obviously thinks that he's just got some probably internal bruising or something. What I suspect happened is that his ribs broke and then punctured some organs is likely what happened. But he seems to be aware that he's on his way out and is just kind of like, listen, we're going to do what we got to do. So we jump from this scene, which is very dramatic and high stakes, to a weirdly low stakes scene with Trevor. Trevor, guys, we keep being told. Well, I'm wrong. We don't keep being told. We keep seeing bizarre moments with Trevor, and it's not until this episode that we find out that Trevor is, I think it's Carly who says he's older than all of us put together. And this scene is really where you get to see that. He is sprinting, and this motherfucker can fucking run. Like, it's really quite astonishing. And this dude, that his best friend that he's like chit-chatting with and everything, it's really kind of cute because he's watching Trevor like beat him in this little foot race. And clearly he doesn't take it that seriously. But I really like the look on his face as he watches his friend totally outstrip him. He's straight up just like, look at how good this guy is. It's just a kind of a sweet moment between these two friends of him genuinely like admiring the friend that is so good at this. But then there's this like incredibly awkward moment where they ask him to throw a football and he does not know how to throw, and it is very kind of embarrassing. It turns out later that he is just straight up going to quit playing football altogether, which his father nearly like vomits in fury. Like, he cannot believe what he's hearing. But I love the look on Trevor's face as he is running also, because he's clearly like, this body is dope. Like, how awesome would that be if you had a body that was aging to the point of God knows what shape he's in, you know? I don't know what medicine in the future is like. He might be older and be like, you know, in the look of our era, he might look like he's like 45 or something. But he's in a 17-year-old body. And I am only 35 years old. And if I got dropped into a 17-year-old body, I would react this exact same way. Because when people say youth is wasted on the young, when you're young and you hear that, you don't really get what it means. But what it means is you take completely for granted that you can do X, Y, and Z because it's all you've ever known. And then for 2/3 of your life, you can no longer do those things. That's the thing that's so horrifying, is that you start off with a thing that gets taken away pretty fucking quickly, honestly. Around age 25 is when your body starts to be like, all right, we're done growing, we're going to start dying now, and very slowly begins to shut itself down. We're going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to recover from a night of drinking. We're going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to complete your workouts. We're going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to not put weight on when you eat the foods that you used to be able to eat perfectly fine. There is so much about getting older that as a teen, I thought I would be ready for once it began to happen, because of course I had no idea how it really goes. And I love the fact that he gets this and is like thrilled with the whole, the freedom of being able to run the way that he wants to run and feel energized and happy after he does it. He's running and he doesn't stop and gasp for breath. He's like bouncing in place like, damn, I feel so good. And I'm like so jealous. I really, really am. Anya says, reminds me of Firestorm in Legends of Tomorrow. An engineer in his 50s, 60s fuses with a teenager, and together they have a superpower. I watched one season of Legends of Tomorrow and I couldn't do it. I had to tap out. I started calling it, what did I call it? Fables of Yesteryear, I think was what I called it, because I could never like remember the name. But yeah, I just, you know, it's the ideal, right? We all, once we reach a certain age, start to look back and be like, man, I wish that I could just get that old body back, and I would do so much more with it than I did at the time. Because at the time, I thought I had time to do all of these other things. I didn't realize how quickly the things I planned to do were going to start to get difficult enough that I would just straight up not want to do them anymore. Because you really think, at least I did, that it might become more of a challenge, but I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm still going to want to. But that's not really what happens. Not necessarily. So Huggabug says the best thing about Legends is how absolutely ridiculous they're willing to get. Noted. So he winds up having like a meeting a little bit later with the school counselor and his parents. And the counselor is like, look, you really need to get your grades up, because even if you play football, you're not getting a scholarship with the grades that you've got. Like, you're not going to even be able to graduate maybe. And he's in the middle of getting this message on his comm in his ear and is like talking to them as well as to his team. Saying like, yeah, I can do that. I can do the work. And I really enjoyed the abruptness, because he finally is just like, hey, yeah, you guys are obviously going to need to talk without me. I am going to quit football and I'm going to start working harder on science. So don't worry about it. I'm very committed to this and I am serious. I'll see you guys later. And fucking just bounces. And it is hilarious. I love it so much. Like, I love the fact that this guy has been granted this body, which he clearly appreciates and is very much going to make the most of. But he's also like, oh yeah, but I can't rely on this, because he fucking knows, because he's old. He's like, I'm going to enjoy the fuck out of this. Don't get me wrong. But also, this kid, if I'm going to stay here, needs to have a future. And that means getting decent grades, because you can't just live on this forever. And the thing is, if you are somebody who gets lucky and manages to like become a football star, you can technically live on that forever, because you get paid so much that you don't have to work after a point. And so you can just live. But there's a difference between just living on the money and having enough to survive and actually doing shit that you're proud of and wanting to like stay active or keep yourself busy in some way. Which is why so many ex-football stars become like sportscasters and commentary people, or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, he is planning to like do a little bit more, and that makes sense too. And I kind of love the fact that his parents like are so short-sighted about their own son that even though they are older, they don't seem to appreciate that he is making what in the end is a smarter choice. but it's fine. I guess that it would be understandable if he has never shown any aptitude for classwork before, that him saying he's going to quit football and focus entirely on classwork probably is more alarming than inspiring. There's really no reason for them to think that he's going to be able to pull this off. So then we have the run-in between Carly and her... he's not her husband, right? I think he's just an ex at this point. And he is trying to talk to her about getting back together. He's not even really saying that. Really what he's saying is, I can't believe that you won't tolerate my shit more. Guys, listen, if you are a woman, especially if you are a straight woman and you have been in relationships with men who expect you to accept the bare fucking minimum, and I'm sure that this happens for women who are in relationships with other women as well, but in particular, it happens with men. This scene probably rings true to you in some ways. Like, it is a very particular situation because they have a kid and he's abusive, and so that situation specifically you may not relate to, but he literally like hit her so hard that she hit the floor, and he's trying to frame it in this scene. You're really gonna throw away what we had just because I had a little too much to drink one night. That's the way he chooses to say this, rather than, you're really going to break up with me because I beat you to the point that you nearly died? Is that really how you want to play this? Which obviously, that just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? It doesn't really sound like she's overreacting when you say that, does it? So no, you have to change the entire context of what actually happened in order to make it seem like she's the one being ridiculous. And there is a Facebook group that I recommend called "The Bar for Men is So Low, It is Literally a Tavern in Hades." And there are so many stories like this that get shared. Screenshots of text back and forth where dudes literally do this. They try and change up the entire fucking reality of what went down in order to make it seem like the woman is expecting too much of them. And it's so beautiful to watch her. He's like, we've got a connection, right? You're going to tell me you don't miss this? And he says, I do. And he starts to try and like grab on her. Like, he's got his arms on his hands on her shoulders. It's a real power move. And it's really like, it's just really, really gross and invasive. And she knees him in the dick. And he is just saying like, what the fuck? It's like you're an entirely different person. And she says, yeah, it should have happened a long time ago, which I love that line. I love it. It's just, I wish so much that more women were able to suddenly get a bunch of self-defense like uploaded into their brains so that they could do what she's doing. It would be so nice, Matrix style, for them to just suddenly know how to physically defend themselves from guys like this. And the fact that he's a fucking cop, and she, of course, can't file complaints. Like, that's not going to happen. But yeah, she says, you do not touch me. Are we clear? And he says, I still got a right to see my kid. And she says, and your kid has a right to child support. Don't come near us again without it. Which, I swear to God, y'all, the lengths that men will go to avoid paying child support is really astonishing. Owen, the business that he runs, it has a fairly high turnover. And one of the key things is when a man's checks, when he's worked for them long enough that his checks begin to get garnished for child support, pretty much immediately Owen starts putting out ads for new hires, because it is like clockwork. The moment that a man starts to have to pay up child support, the moment that the state catches up with him and starts to take that money is the moment that guy quits. They are so invested in not caring for their own offspring and taking responsibility that they will literally jump from job to job every 3 months, 4 months in order to avoid paying. And this dude is a fucking cop with a steady job. This isn't somebody, you know, like, but still nothing, apparently. She's getting nothing from him. Yeah, he's trash. And it kills me because, like, in other scenes when he's talking to everybody, he's a pretty good cop. Like, he can read people pretty well. And that's part of what makes people good abusers as well, is being able to read people well. They can sense weaknesses. They can sense, like, uncertainty or lies or whatever. And so the moments where he is a good cop, I keep having to remind myself that this is what made him good at abusing a woman who didn't have resources or confidence or what have you. And the moment where he catches up at one point with Marcy, and is questioning her about the fight that night. And he pretty much tells her that if she keeps staying with her caseworker, that he could lose his job. And he says it in such a way as if to be like, I know that you're staying there, and if you don't tell me what I want to know about that fight, I will report him. He doesn't say it, and it's not even like he phrases everything overtly enough for it to really be taken that way, but there's a vibe to it. And it's really uncomfortable. I hated it. So then we have this whole thing going on with Philip and what's the name of his the lawyer that he had? I can't remember his lawyer's name. But Philip's like getting basically like held over the fire by this lawyer who wants numbers for gambling, and he's like literally being given winning numbers that fucking Philip knows for sure are winners. And rather than just making the most of that, he continues to fucking lose and push it a little bit too far, which just, dude. And I get it. He doesn't understand that the info Philip is giving him is straight up factual. He doesn't understand. Philip's not working on the odds. He's not creating an algorithm of likely outcomes. Philip is working with history. And he doesn't understand that. So I understand in a way why he's continuing to push it, because he kind of thinks like, oh, I've got this figured out. However, like, dude, sincerely, what are you doing? Oh my God. And Philip is using this lawyer as like his go-between to get the house that they're going to wind up holing up in. I wish that I could remember. It's not Gary, is it? What's the name of his lawyer, guys? But overall, it's just a lot of uncomfortable scenes between him and Philip, where Philip is fucking still recovering from this gunshot wound. Shit is not looking good for him. And he is like, oh, looks like such shit, sweating and pale and gross. And he keeps sort of being like, I'm the one that kept you out of jail, in such a way as to, you know, just imply that maybe he'll get Philip thrown back in jail. Maybe he will do whatever he needs to do in order to keep this dude under his thumb. And it's really gross and annoying. And like, I kind of liked this dude initially because he was so sort of, so shady in such an obvious way that I appreciated that despite being shady, he still kept his word on things. Like, he still gave money to the families that, you know, that Philip had asked him to and all of that, when he could have just run off with that money and never done what he said. And what could Philip have done about it? Ray. Oh, thank you, Hugabug. So I really did think at first, okay, this guy isn't like 100%, but he's better than I expected. And then as this wore on, this episode, I started to be like, oh God, maybe not. But we'll see how that winds up going. So we have the moment with McLaren and Holden. Is that his name? Forbes, who Forbes is a good cop and has figured out exactly where these guys are holed up based on the license plates on the car that took off and linking those registrations with the lease on the building, I guess, that they are in. And McLaren is like, so file for a warning, get down there, huh? And he says, already got it, like cutting right to the chase. So McLaren has to send a text, or no, he uses his comm and gets in with Marcy and is just like, hey, so they totally know where you are and they're heading that way. And this turns into this whole thing with like moving this dude that Carly has been operating on. Marcy, sorry, I keep doing that, has been operating on, and Hall digging in his heels about that. They wind up doing it in the end anyway, but Hall is of the opinion that McLaren should have mitigated the threat in the first place from Forbes, aka killed him. The fact that Forbes was on their trail and was figuring it out and was good at his job makes him a danger, and he needs to be taken out of the equation entirely. Which is the kind of thing that, like, I understand his feeling on this in general. When I'm watching a show where somebody consistently is a problem and the option of killing them is clearly on the table, usually I am the person who's just like, you just need to kill them. They are going to be a continuing problem. However, in this case, it's so stupid of Hall to suggest, like, how the fuck is McLaren supposed to do that and not make it look like that's exactly what the fuck happened? How the fuck is he supposed to do that and, like, continue to be trusted by other people and do the job that he was sent here to do in the first place? And one of the protocols is to not hurt anybody, and this is directly in opposition to that. And also, you're relying on the idea that if you got rid of Forbes, that another guy who was much less competent would take his place. And you can't guarantee that. You don't know that. So, like, it's essentially just getting rid of a problem temporarily, but acting as if it's a permanent solution, when in fact they're going to be replaced and you have no idea what this new person, like, at least at the moment, Forbes trusts McLaren. And if McLaren tried to redirect him in another way at some point, he has built up enough trust with Forbes that I think he could pull that off. But he gets a brand new partner whom he has no relationship with, and there's no particular reason why that partner is going to trust him and why he would be able to get away with the stuff that he's likely going to have to try and pull later on. Really, Hall is just being incredibly simplistic and very short-term thinking, and that is clear based on the fact that the plan that he had come up with, that he keeps saying was a good plan, was about to get busted by the FBI. And this wasn't like a lead that McLaren found. This was something that his partner had apparently, like, put together, and other people were in on as well. So, like, yeah, no, he is obviously not great at this whole plan, but he seems to think that he has it all figured out and everybody else is the idiot. And it is just really frustrating and hard to watch the way that he, like, talks shit to everybody. He comes in and, like, you know, is trying to push Philip out of the way to get on the computer and telling other people that they don't know what they're doing. He finally, like, winds up yelling at all of them about, you know, the fact that, first of all, Marcy had her kid in the car, which, like, rightfully, she has a child. What's she supposed to do? Just leave it? And apparently he thinks so. But she still has a cover to maintain. What do you think? How is that going to work? You know, she gets arrested for, like, child endangerment and neglect. How is she supposed to continue doing her job? Like, there's so much that he just acts as if everybody is being absurd. And I genuinely want him to tell me what he thinks the alternative is. What does he believe they should have done instead? And did he think through in the slightest what the potential consequences of that could be? Like, yeah, no, I hate him. And the whole, like, the assumptions that he is making about this team after having worked with them for one day. He even says something about, like, this guy's a junkie. That's the body he got put in. Is it a problem? Fucking of course it's a problem, clearly. But also, what do you want? Do you want him to just, like, get put in another body? That's not a thing that can be done, or else I clearly would have fucking done it by now. There's so much about the accusations that he's making that genuinely I just want to be like, and what do you think they should have done? So all of this comes down to a moment of him telling McLaren that he needs to kill Forbes. And this is really, really tense, you guys. And I really thought maybe he's going to do it. Maybe this is going to be the moment where McLaren, like, has to start going against his gut, better judgment, and morals, and gonna kind of start to undo him, where he has to kill his own partner who's, like, a good person and simply is a little too good at his job. And there's of course that conversation between Philip and Carly where Philip says, just imagine how McLaren feels. He's the one who has to do it. And Carly says he doesn't have to do anything. The director didn't order it. And I mean, yeah, I guess not. But I can't help but think, because that keeps being what Hall brings up, is that the director put us together. Why do you think that is? And he keeps assuming the director put us together because I'm the one that's supposed to be in charge of this operation because I have seniority, yada, yada, yada. And is that why? Or is it because the director is aware that you're fucking, like, way, way off task and you're doing shit that's dangerous and risky, and the director wants you taken care of? Because I bet they find out later that this is what was supposed to happen. That the director was like, all right, we're going to need to get done with these people. But of course, because Hall is so convinced that he is better at the job than they are, he assumes that's why they have been put together. And we have a conversation between him and Luca where he's talking about, like, you know, the fact that he knows who McLaren is and that he's the type that'll fall in line. And Luca's like, and what if he doesn't? And he says, well, then he'll have to go. And then we go to McLaren and he is with Forbes, and he has his gun out and it looks like he is about to shoot Forbes in the back of the head. But then the car pulls around and they snatch these guys. And I love this moment where Hall just says, son of a bitch, because he clearly can't believe how totally he messed up on his appraisal. He underestimated, maybe, or at least misestimated what exactly it is that McLaren stands for and believes. So, yeah, he doesn't kill them, which he could have done. It would have been hard to do probably and pull off and be, like, completely out of the... Maybe not. They're both criminals. They probably could have just made it look like these guys got by some of their own people, which would have been what happened. But I do like the fact that he manages to find a way that they get caught up and put somewhere safely away from everybody and doesn't actually have blood on his hands. At the same time, the fact that they aren't dead worries me, because Hall is a vengeful fucking guy. And I don't doubt that he can find a way to, like, get out of this somehow and come at them for whatever reason. And they search the car and they are looking for clearly, like, the parts that they're going to need. I am assuming that the case that the FBI agent, like, took out of the trunk. Oh yeah, that's right. The FBI agent was Trevor. So yeah, he takes that case and they are able to do the handoff in the end anyway. But later on, when McLaren is talking to Forbes about it, they have to be like, oh, they didn't find anything in their car. That was weird. So he's like, yeah, I assume that they made the handoff already. But it's a really satisfying moment because I genuinely was like worried for McLaren at this point, because nothing is going to shatter your own confidence in your ability to like complete a task and a mission. Like being forced to take someone out who really does not seem to deserve it for reasons that you aren't 100% sure are legit. This could have eaten away at him forever. And it's possible that this situation that is now created will also eat away at him forever. But I tend to think he feels like he did the right thing in the end. So yeah, they do the handoff. This woman says, as long as it works, Helios isn't far away, which I don't know what that means, but that is what she says before she gets in the car. And then we have this moment at the end where McLaren is talking to all of them and saying, like, I want to touch base about what we did tonight. I never thought we would have to turn on a fellow traveler, but what are you going to do? Like, I think that this was the only choice that we had. And as he's saying this, there's this montage of everybody in their different homes. You know, we've got Trevor in his ridiculous bedroom, and he's reading like a geography textbook. And we've got Philip, who's cleaning up all of the crazy like death numbers that were up, which Ray fucking saw, but thankfully Ray doesn't seem to like remember things real well. And McLaren, it turns out, is in bed with Marcy, which like we know that they're involved. Like that was already a thing between the two of them. But it's really weird because his wife came to him at the office, clearly thinking that maybe he was like not going to be there, that he was having an affair. And at the time you're like, oh, in bed with Carly. Ugh, I keep getting them mixed up. I wish that they both didn't have names that ended in Y. It would just be Marcy and Carly are a little too close together. Thank you, Hugabug. But yeah, I thought she thinks that he's cheating because he's away all the time because he's doing all this traveler stuff. But no, I mean, he is in love with Carly. He is obviously hooking up with Carly. Like this has been a thing, but it just didn't even occur to me. So his wife says something like, it's been a while. And he gets a look on his face and he's like, yeah, it has. And clearly he is going to have to fuck his wife. Like he has to do that. But he considers that cheating on the woman that he's actually into, which is Carly. Fucked up situation. I'm very interested to see how he kind of resolves that. But damn, like it's only been a couple of weeks. So the fact that his wife is like, it's been a while. I'm like, all right, you two, apparently you were pretty active. Good on you. I feel like really bad for Carly in this situation as well, because she has to know that he doesn't really have a choice if he wants to keep this like whole deal up, but she has to just sort of like be okay with it. And that's rough. You know, some people probably could be, and she might be able to, but for me, that would be hard. Being like, oh yeah, he's totally going to go and fuck this other chick who's also pretty fucking hot. Like it's not, you know, some chore for him, I'm sure. But I'm sure it's strange. But yeah, so we'll see how this goes. But it's funny because again, when her husband, Carly's husband or ex-boyfriend shows up and is accusing her of like hooking up with that white guy, at the time I was kind of like, oh, come on, dude. And now I'm like, oh no, she totally is. Duh. Like I just keep forgetting that that's how things are between the two of them. So anyway, I'm over time as usual, but thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you again to Michael for commissioning this episode. It's a really good one. And, I'm really looking forward to watching the next one. So hopefully I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.